Okay, in this video, we talk a little bit about how to querying or grabbing data from a data set. And again, we're going to look at different techniques. So these are just some things you can do in Excel. We're going to look at the vlookup function, which definitely you want to put in your toolbox. But I think a superior method is, rather than using vlookup, is to use the combination of match index. I think match index has some advantages over vlookup. It's a little bit more complicated to remember how to do it, but I like it better than the vlookup. And then we'll have another video on the offset function. So I'm back to the original worksheet, the supermarket data set, and you can see what I've done up here is I've grabbed all these, and if I wanted to look for a specific transaction in this record of 14,000 records, and I wanted to grab the date, one way to do that is with the vlookup. So I've got, right now, that's my input too, and that could be any of these transaction numbers. And I want to grab the date, which I want it to return that, which is trivial right now, but if that was 2,476 record, what would the date? Well, then I would have to scroll down, and I want to quickly grab it. So what I'm going to use is a vlookup. The vlookup is a function. It takes 1, 2, 3, 4 arguments. The last argument is optional, but you need to use it in this case because the default is not what we want. And the very first thing is, what value do you want to look up? Well, I want to look up this. And what the vlookup does is always look in the leftmost column of your table that you grab. And a table is just an array of cells, just a table of cells. The leftmost column is where it looks up this value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up, I'm going to go ahead and grab out here all the way down, and then so I grab that entire data set, or not the entire, but out to column J. Whoops, I forgot to get the lookup value first. Lookup value is this in this data set. And now what column do I want to return? So right now this table array has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns, and I want it to look up the value that I referenced in A7 in this, the first column, and then I want to return the value in the second column, because in this data the second column is this one. So the second column I'm going to hard code to. And the last argument is, what do you want to look for, something close or an exact match? If it's close, what it does is it finds a number in here that's closest to the value but not exceeding. So if you had real numbers and you wanted to find up to and including but not exceeding, you could use the approximate, which is the default. So we don't want the default. We want to exactly find the value that we put in A7. If it doesn't exist, I want it to return an error. So I'm going to put false because I'm looking for an exact match. Now this is the data set. I'm going to go ahead and put some copy data, some dollar signs around that. Also, I'm going to put a dollar sign around my column of the data I look up. And this is what it returns. That formula returns this. Well, that's a weird number. That doesn't look like that at all. But the format of this is a number. If I change the format of this to a date, then you can see it gets that number. Now, just some references in Excel. Excel, I think, starts in January 1st, 1900 is day one. And so when you look at this and when you see a number like 41,993, that's if you would go up to 2014 and every day, that's what the math of it does. I'm pretty sure it starts at January 1st, 1900. Regardless, if you go change the format of that to some date format, it figures it out that is that. And I've got all these dollar signs around it, so when I copy this to the right, look what happens. It returns that again because it's still referencing this value from this table. Now I don't want to reference column 2, I want to reference column 3. Like that. Now I don't want that as a date, that's just a number. I mean, that's just a customer ID, so I'm going to put that back to a number. And I don't need the decimals. And every time, if I would have referenced, if I could point to this, I could make this column 2 column 3, column 4, column 5. And now I could go back and then point to that column. So now I don't have a hard-coded. Copy this over to the right. There's this, so these is what these are. Again, I don't have space, but that's what I could do. So that's the use of a vlookup, and so you can look up any transaction, 2,476, and it figures out what that is. This particular data set only goes down to 14,059. So if I reference anything bigger than that, like give me transaction 15,000, it gives me an error, which is what I want in this case. I want it to tell me that there's that transaction doesn't exist. I don't want it to get close. So that's why I use the exact match. Now that's the vlookup. You can get there doing the same thing with the match index. So let me show you the match index. So this is going to be the same thing. Let's put it back to 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is the match, just so you, because I'm going to nest the match within the index. So I'm going to match, and what I'm going to do is look up this value in this array, and then return an exact match. I'm returning 0. And what it does, it finds 2, which it happens, what this is telling me then, what a match does is gives me the index, the which row, and so it comes from the second row. So this is 1,000, this is kind of trivial, but it tells me, since these are all numbers from 1, they're incremental, it tells me, it gives me the match number. But sometimes, remember, I can look up, I don't have to look up a transaction number, I could look up a customer ID, I could look up anything, and this is going to tell me which row it is. Now, I'm going to nest that within an index function. So what the index does, and I'm going to use the second one here, is it's going to look up a reference, and so I'm going to, in this reference, I'm going to grab the column that I want to grab the data from. So I'm going to look. So my first argument is going to be B10 through B. This is this data set. So I'm going to look up in this column of data which row. Well, I'm using my match to do that. And the column number is just that column. It's just column 1, which is you can see the column number is optional. So I'm actually just going to finish that up and do that. Put that back to 2. Change this to a date. Now the benefit of this is a couple things. One thing is that the vlookup actually has to it takes a little bit longer to run. So in real large data sets, the match index is going to get there a little quicker. The problem with this is that if I would ever insert a column in this, and then I have 3 and then 4, I would have to rename my index numbers. But with this formula, I can always look what I'm going to do. The A8 is, I'm going to always look up that number. I'm going to put a $sign around this and put a $sign around my A, like that. So I've hard-coded. I'm always looking up this value in this column. But it doesn't have to be the leftmost column. I could look for in any column. It doesn't make any difference, because all it's going to do is tell me which row in that column that I want. And then it's going to return that row from the very first argument, the reference. So now that I've got that, if I copy this to the right, I'm getting my, and again, these don't need to be dates. These need to be just a regular number. That's the ID. There's that one. But the nice thing about that is if I ever insert a column, then my vlookup is going to break, but this index, match index, will still work. So the match index is more robust. I don't always have to look in the leftmost column. I could look at it in any column. It's a little bit faster, and when you add columns, if you add columns, it doesn't break as quickly, and you don't have to remember if you're adding an additional column. Okay, that's the purpose of this is to be able to query a large data set and grab some information fairly quickly, and that's the vlookup or the match nested within an index. Thanks.